Today we're going to be looking at the simple past, how it's formed in German, how it's used in German, and to simplify our discussion a bit, we're going to be looking specifically at German weak verbs. Other presentations that I'm going to be doing in the near future will be looking at irregular verbs and at strong verbs. But today we're going to be looking specifically at German weak verbs. So, as usual, we're going to start the lecture with an example in English, and then we're going to transition over to a brief discussion of when do we use the simple past in German. And then after that, I'm going to give 3 examples on using the simple past. Machen, to make, arbeiten, to work, and haben, to have. Each one sort of gives an example of sort of rules that we could use with other weak verbs in German. So, looking first at English, what is the simple past? So, simple past, the first sentence, I rode the bus to work, it reports sort of a habitual action. I rode the bus to work every day. Or it could be a single event in the past. I rode the bus to work, and then I did something else. Or it could be a state of being. I knew what to do. In each case, it's a simple past. It's one verb. It's not a construction with a helper verb. I have ridden the bus to work, or I have known what to do. So that's essentially the simple past in a nutshell in English. So German uses the simple past primarily in written narratives. So books, newspapers, magazine articles, German fairy tales uses the simple past exclusively. It's used, however, less in spoken German. It just sounds, some verbs just sound odd. As we'll see one example today, arbeiten, it just doesn't lend itself very well to a spoken situation. Some verb forms, however, are used exclusively in spoken German. These are sort of what I tell my students that are at the high frequency verbs, such as haben, SEIN, and the modal verbs. Let's take a look at forming the simple past using, well, first of all, there's 3 ways to form the simple past in German, depending on whether you have a weak verb, an irregular verb, or a strong verb. So like today, I'm going to be focusing primarily on the weak verbs. And the other lectures I'll have in the future will look specifically at irregular verbs and strong verbs. I think that breaking it down this way makes it a little bit more manageable. We'll create shorter videos and sort of more memorable chunks for you to learn from. So, how do we form a simple past? I took a regular sort of run-of-the-mill weak verb machen, to make, and we use our infinitive form here. This is the form that you find in the dictionary. Now what we want to do in the next step is to take machen and to remove the stem from it, the infinitive ending. Or not remove the stem, we remove the infinitive ending, and that provides us with the verb stem, which is mach. Now, what we want to do after we've removed the infinitive ending is we want to go and add what I call a simple past marker. So, machte. Now, this shows that the verb is now in the simple past tense. And once we've completed these 3 steps, we have machte. What we'll do is we'll simply add an ending according to the declension. So du machtest, and yeah, so that's what we have. You'll see in the upper right hand corner that in the singular we only have the ending in the second person singular. And actually, let's take a closer look at that slide. So this is what it looks like: machte, machtest, machte, machten, machtet, and machten. So now what's nice about machen, it's very easy to manage. We remove the infinitive ending. We have a stem that ends in an H, and we simply add the simple past marker, te, and then if required, we add the endings to that. Now let's take it at another verb, arbeiten. And to work. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the infinitive ending, or the infinitive, and remove the infinitive ending. Now, this sort of presents us with a problem because then we have Arbeit, and the stem ends in a T here. So what we're going to do is, if we have a verb that ends in a T or ends in a D, we're going to have to insert an E before the simple past marker. This sort of makes it, if you think about it, more pronounceable. You wouldn't say Arbeit. You put the E in there to make it more easy to speak. Arbeitet. So once we've done that, and we've added the simple past marker with this E before it, then we just can repeat the steps that we've done before. We add the ending, and we get this sort of unpronounceable du arbeitetest, which is, I guess, sort of a good reason or a good example of why we don't really use the simple past a lot in spoken German. It just sort of is difficult to speak, even with the added E in there. Germans won't say du arbeitetest, they would say du hast gearbeitet, which is much more pronounceable. But then again, if you look at the upper right hand corner, we have the same conjugation pattern. And let's take a closer look at that with this slide. So, ich arbeitete, excuse me, ich arbeitete, du arbeitetest, sie es arbeitete. See, that's why we don't do this. Sie es arbeitete, arbeiteten, arbeitetet, and arbeiteten. Like I said, this is something you won't do in spoken German, but you would see most likely in some type of written form or narrative. Now, finally, let's take a look at the verb haben, to have, an infinitive. Now, this is an unusual one because it's technically, I guess, it's a weak verb. There's not a vowel change in the root. It's not a strong verb. It's not a irregular verb, but there is a slight change in the stem. As we have the infinitive, remove the infinitive ending, and what we're going to do is we're going to change the B to a T. So note that change. B goes to a T, and then from there on out, it's going to be roughly the same, with the exception that even though the stem now ends in a T, we're not going to insert an E before the simple past marker. So it's going to be hatte, and on hatte we're just going to add on the conjugation patterns. So what we'll get is something that looks like this. Ich hatte, du hattest, hatte, wir hatten, ihr hattet, Sie hatten. Now this is one of those high frequency ones that you'll hear more often in spoken German. You could also hear ich habe gehabt, but ich hatte just sort of rolls off the tongue a little bit better. So anyway, that's introduction to the simple past by means of weak verbs. Future video presentations will look at strong verbs and at irregular verbs as well.